So, uh, thanks for joining me. This is Yoav Golan Art, and I found your work. What was it now? Maybe 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and some of the pieces that we're going to talk about today caught my eye. The trees, the big salmon that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And I was just happy to have you on because I'd like to hear some more about your process and what you think about artwork in the space, and really to hear about, what are your thoughts when you go from, walking around the world to a finished piece, and talking about some of the steps along the way.
Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, it's really, I have I would say like two main ways that I end up coming up with a piece. One is I either, start with a photo, and then there's usually some object in that photo that I'm kind of taken with and I want to pull out in some shape or form. Um, or I'll start with something, more abstract, just a pattern or a texture or something, and then kind of try and see what I can do with that. Um, so those are kind of like the two broad categories that most of my stuff fits into. Weirdly, the trees project kind of is in the middle of those. It's not
Okay.
quite fully abstract. I mean, it's pretty abstract, I guess, but
And we'll
um,
talk about a couple of those, but
sorry, I might be getting ahead of myself here, but
no, that's okay. Okay. So let's go. One of the first pieces that you said you want to talk about, you said this was the one of the best pieces you've ever done, was this statue of a salmon. So I'll put that on the screen now, and anyone who's visited your Twitter profile has seen this. Um, but you also sent me, interestingly enough, the reference photo, the picture of this real life, very, very, I was surprised. I had to look closely before I realized that there was an actual little bridge across the tail, and it actually gave me scale for what this thing is. Tell me about this real life statue or monument.
yeah, so it's a bit of a local landmark here in Atlanta, which is where I'm based. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it is the venue is the Atlanta Fish Market, which is a pretty popular restaurant here. Um, and I basically got that photo from across the street from a friend's apartment when she was moving out. It was actually at the beginning of COVID. I'm sure a lot of people were going through some life changes. She was as well. So
Yeah,
we were
yeah.
helping her pack things up. And I just remember looking out and I saw, you know, that fish from an angle I hadn't seen it from before, because usually, you're at ground level. And it just had that bird kind of sitting right on the tip of the nose.
Mm-hmm.
And I
That's
really,
probably a seagull or something?
uh, I, I'm not sure. I think it might have just been, a typical crow.
Okay.
Um, but it just seemed kind of like a magical moment. So I grabbed my phone out, snapped a picture, and then like almost immediately the bird flew away after that. And I was like, ooh, got it. Um, and then after that, I put it through its paces, cleaned it up around it. As you can see, I kind of kept the clouds in there because I just liked that effect, and it just ended up being this like weird, almost to me like biblical looking image that I then just spent a totally unreasonable amount of time, editing and touching up, um, which was good during the pandemic to have a project. So
For sure. So there are some aspects of, for example, the texture that come through. You can tell in the reference photo that this has been Sculpted. What is this, copper probably, if it's green like that?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's copper. Yeah.
Some of the detail in the scales is still in the final manipulated image that you end up with. But what are some of the things that you do between taking a reference photo like that and you've got an idea in your head of what you want it to look like eventually, and what are some of the steps in between there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do rely on some artificial intelligence to bring out the colors and all that. But it's really a matter of, I bring it into a sketch app that I use, all on my phone. I
Mm-hmm.
do have a stylus. Couldn't get by without a stylus, but um, and yeah, you just, I don't necessarily know that I have an exact idea that I'm working towards. Sometimes I do, but not necessarily. And it's just a matter of like going in there and cleaning it up and removing some of the things that you don't want in the picture necessarily, like take the power lines. Took forever to get out of there. um and
And I noticed the railing of the little bridge at the bottom as well in the
yeah,
in
the
the
railing
original
and
photo. In the original photo, yeah.
then you can see also that the bottom of the tail, for example, doesn't actually exist in the actual statue. That part's underground. So you take the image and you kind of just have to extend it and try and flesh it out to make it work.
Yeah, because I mean I've never seen a photo of this real life landmark, so I would have assumed that this was a fish leaping up into the air. I wouldn't have guessed from, like, there's a real motion and vitality to it that I wouldn't have guessed that it was based on a photo of something that's actually rooted into the ground. So you've really preserved that sense of movement and life in it, as you've kind of freed it from the ground.
Thank you. Yeah, and I mean the sky definitely helps with that a little bit too, making it seem like it's a mile up in the air in a certain
Mm-hmm.
place. And I was lucky to have had a pretty nice, cloudy but not too cloudy day there for grabbing that photo.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay. Now you mentioned your trees there as something kind of halfway in between uh, reality and surreality. So let's go over three or four of the trees that we talked about. So I know you sent me a bunch, and I'm going to use them as a slideshow. But let's talk about the seedling.
Sure. Yeah, that's honestly one of my favorites in the whole set. Just because it's really not like any of the others. I have a lot where they are fully fleshed out trees with branches and everything and leaves, and they look very lush. I have others that are more like bare bones, just branches. Um, but this one, yeah, the idea just kind of popped into my head for it. And um, yeah, it was just a matter of taking something very simple and very humble looking and kind of trying to give it a little bit of life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so you said you had done these in a series. How many of these? How many of these have you got going so far?
So I have 50 of them. And I put those out there a couple weeks ago. Still have a few left in my pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Might be doing some giveaways with those in the near future. But um, yeah, there is a full set of 50 of them, and they're each, I try to bring something unique and different to every single one of them to make them really stand out and have a life of their own.
Mm-hmm. Well, of the ones you've sent me, they're all very, very different from one another, and like you said, they each kind of have a different vibe. Now, was there any intentionality? So I'm going to pull up the winter one, or what I would call a winter one. So I was in high school in the Eastern Canada ice storm of 1998 when every tree everywhere looked like this. It had an actual inch of ice on the outside of every tree and shut power down and shut the whole town down. Was there any intentionality about trying to, I'm going to hit every season? Because some of them look wintry, some of them look like spring, some of them look like new growth. Did you kind of plan that ahead of time, or were you just kind of going with whatever idea you had that day?
Yeah, I definitely didn't have any kind of concrete plan. Definitely not at the outset of the series for what I was going to include or not include. It's kind of art for me is a very improvisational kind of process. I don't necessarily like having a strict plan. I definitely don't have any, anything resembling a roadmap or anything like that for the long-term future. I work a corporate job during the day, so I get plenty of roadmaps in my life.
Yeah,
Don't
of
need that in
course.
my side gig. Um, so yeah, I wouldn't say that there was necessarily um, any kind of set idea for what I was going to do, which is kind of freeing in a lot of ways. So yeah, with every piece, it was kind of, just start with that circle,
Hmm.
um, and see where it takes you, see where the the stylus will take me, and then from there it's see where the AI software will take me, what it'll come up with, and then when it does produce something that I find interesting or that strikes me in a certain way, then it's just a matter of kind of cleaning it up and figuring out how to draw it out, either with um, different image processing apps, or sometimes going in and just manually touching it up, pixels at a time sometimes.